One of the most central teachings in the Buddhist Dhamma is of karma. Karma, which is a sort of moral law of the universe, in the same way that gravity is a physical law. So there's a moral law too, which is a sort of a cause and effect relationship between your actions and actions, especially including your intentions. And so karma not only is a physical mechanism, but it's a internal one as well. So that your intentions then play out in how your actions have an effect. Which is, to put the most simple example, there's a different karma of stepping on an ant because you didn't see it versus stepping on an ant because you saw it. Now, the same action happened and the same physical result happened. An ant died. You know, there's a crawling ant and then there's no crawling ant anymore. But in this moral universe of the law of karma, of cause and effect, then what it does to your mind, the cause of intending to kill something, it may physically have the same effect outside of you, but inside of you, the effect is very different. So the law of karma, in terms of a cause and effect relationship, first and foremost is about understanding, how our minds are shaped, and that there is a relationship between what we think and what we will think. And what we think and what we will think then naturally has a relationship to how we speak and to how we act. So thought, speech, and action are all related in terms of karma. And the main karma that we're working on here in the moral universe is that of intention or volition. We see this happening throughout life, so that if something is repeated again and again, it's more likely to be repeated. It's more likely to happen. And it gets to a point where someone may mischaracterize themselves to say, I am this type of person, right? I'm a patient person, or I'm an impatient person, or I'm an angry person. That's just the way I am. She's angry. Not that she produces anger, but rather she is. It gets to the point where it's repeated so often that we take it to characterize ourselves or to characterize others. Yeah. So it becomes a state of mind, a state of self. It becomes defining, which takes the karma away from it. See, if karma is this process of cause and effect relationship, and then to make it into a state of being is to deny the karma. And that's what happens when we start to have a strong sense of self. Because we take the karma out of the equation. And that's a real problem, because when that happens, we start to take the free will out of the equation. Because if I am a certain person, like I have a strong identity and I'm like this, then I don't see much possibility for change. Karma is about change that happens through will. Okay? It's not a impartial universe. It's a willed universe. Who's willing it? Well, as far as you're concerned, you. Right? Your mind, okay, is choosing moment by moment. What we want to do is we want to slow down and notice that process happening. That there's a cause and effect relationship happening And it's not just, happening to you. It's also happening by you. That's important because it gives you a certain moral agency in your life. So you're not just, reacting or responding. You're initiating. And that's why the observation aspect of mindfulness, of looking at your mind and seeing how these patterns come up again and again, is key to making a choice. Am I going to put, energy into changing that, or just let it continue? Is this pattern beneficial or is it harmful? When I say pattern, I say this karma, It's a good karma or bad karma. People say good karma and bad karma. In the popular usage, it just means something happening to me. Kind of like winning a lottery, like it was luck. Good luck or bad luck. Good karma usually means, in the proper way, well-intentioned choices. Or, poorly intentioned choices. Beneficial or harmful. What was your intention behind this? Now, why am I starting with all this? Because we see that there's a continuum that happens from moment to moment. And if we were to look really closely at what, deep practitioners are training to do, is to look at that process on the microsecond level of seeing how thoughts arise by the slightest trigger. And then it creates a whole relationship to yourself and the world. And it may start with, say, a sense or an outer, stimulus. Then it triggers this whole kind of continuum. There's forms and there's feelings or sensations, and then, there's this kind of perception of it, and then there are these thoughts about it, like and dislike, and then there's a strong sense of self. Those are called the 5 skandhas, or aggregates of how we make ourselves over and over again. And when we slow it down, we can see that happening, that process happening. And it's not happening automatically. This is why I'm saying this. There's the choice aspect there when it comes to the skandha, or the aggregate of volition. Like there's a sound, something happens, the door opens and closes. Okay? There's a form. The door. Open and close. Produces a sound. Right? The sound reaches my ear. There's a feeling. Okay, I actually sense something. My eardrum rings. And then I have a sort of sensation, a perception of it, where I say, oh yeah, there's a sound. I recognize sound happening. And the sound also is sort of understood as pleasant or unpleasant. Let's say someone slams the door. Okay? And it's unpleasant. And it's the 4th level of this action. There's a form, there's a door. Okay? There's a feeling or a sensation of sound. Right? There's a perception of it, like a loud sound that is unpleasant. And then the 4th level is volition, where I say, like, I want or I don't want. There's the personal relationship to this process. That's where it gets personal, right? And that's where we start, getting preferences, likes and dislikes, and reacting on an emotional level. This is the emotional level of this process. And on that emotional level, I have a certain then relationship to the world of like and dislike. It's strong. And from that I get a sense of self. My general consciousness is happy or unhappy. Right? So yeah, big slam, zoom, real quick, damn, this is bad. Or nice, bird singing, how pleasant, helping my meditation. Happens in the blink of an eye. when we can start to observe that more closely, we see in this, what we think is an inevitable process, we see that there's a choice there. Within that, there's a certain freedom I can find. But I need to sit and observe closely. This is happening again and again. It's not given that the stimuli you receive throughout your day are either going to, make you happy or angry. That's not a given. That's your karma, meaning that's your choice you make along the way. When I say your karma, it's not good or bad karma that the door slammed, or that, you tripped and hurt your toe. That's not bad karma. The bad karma is what you do with it, or the good karma is what you do with it. There's a choice there. Yeah? There's a choice there. And that makes karma not fate. It makes karma liberating. So you can take the raw materials of your life and make it into something that is beneficial, nutritious, or, junk food. But it's a choice we make. When you slow down and you see there's a world out there, I'm interacting with it through my 5 senses, 6 senses, in the Buddhist idea, which is the sense of thought. Yeah. But the relationship is not a given. It's not automatic. I am reinforcing my positive or negative relationship to the world, moment by moment. And when you start to observe that in meditation, you see, wow, you are then empowered to make a difference. Now, this is the freedom of mindfulness. This is the freedom of a strong meditation practice. Is you see that your relationship to the world is not fixed. It's fluid. But you need to observe really closely to see it doesn't just happen, and then I'm upset. Where did that upset come from? Or that joy come from? There was a stage there where your mind met your perceptions and gave it a unique interpretation according to your flow of life at this point. And that interpretation is yours. You have to own it. It's not from the world. It didn't come from the world. And that's where karma meets freedom, is to know that you have a choice at that moment. So I'm trying to get in a roundabout way to the idea of rebirth, reincarnation. I'll get there. This relationship is being repeated moment by moment on the micro moment level, endlessly. Okay, endlessly. From a standpoint of time, that time did not start at a certain point. Perhaps the Big Bang was the point of our universe beginning. But, I'm not a physicist to say that time probably existed before the Big Bang, because, what was there, nothing? I don't know. But if we can go back to the Big Bang, fine. Whenever that was, 4 billion years ago? 20 billion? How long ago was it? Long time ago.
16, I think.
16 billion? What's a few billion?
I think Taj should give us the newest theory, is a theoretical physics.
I don't study astrophysics. So
You don't remember
It was before his time.
Anyway, it's been going back for a long time. Okay? But there's some relationship between us and everything that came before us. And there's some relationship between us and everything that will come after us. To say that this 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, or 20 years, or 30 years is like outside of time is an irrational statement. To say that it is like unique and separate, closed off, simply does not make sense in terms of just our physical reality. We can't really, say that. It doesn't make sense. Because you know that you came from everything that happened before you. You can even trace just, the moment of birth, the moment before birth, 6 months, 3 months, month and a half, conception, egg and sperm, parents, their childhood, their birth. And we can go back farther and farther and farther, right back to Adam and Eve. And I don't know who came before them, but there was somebody. And it goes back endlessly in the Buddhist idea, and it will continue endlessly. And we're a continuation of that. On that level, we can understand that we are in a continuum of change that began before our physical lifetimes and will continue after our physical lifetimes. Now, on that level, we can agree, right? We can just agree on that. Okay? We can also agree that just as the choices you make karmically, meaning volitionally, meaning from your own intentions, from your intentional choices, will have an effect on your life and the quality of your life. That the quality of your life affects other people around you, doesn't it? So if you're happy and peaceful, you're going to affect other people, who are in your sphere of influence. And they're going to affect other people in their sphere of influence, and it kind of spreads out. And if you're upset and miserable, it's going to affect them as well, right, in your sphere of influence. Now, that also cannot, it is irrational to say that ends at the point of death, that influence. Cannot end at the point of our physical death. Because if you have children or friends or colleagues who even just remember you, your influence then continues. Right? So you just, even on that level of the karmic choices you made, meaning the intentional life you lived, right, is having an influence after you're not here. And it will continue, even though it won't be traced to your name, like a name on a bench in a park. It won't be like that, traceable. Although maybe if you have nice kids, they'll make you a bench in the park. I'm hoping for it, but I haven't chosen where. Which country is my main?
We will take care of that.
We'll take care of the bench. Thanks.
We'll give you something in the desert.
In the desert? All right. Something that nobody will see ever. So you can just understand on that level as well. On the physical level, the process began before us, will continue after. On the intentional karmic level, it began before us and it will continue after. So that life and intention and effects and influence, for good and bad, continues after us. So on that level, we also don't need to get into a sort of metaphysical or a religious belief of reincarnation or rebirth. We just can acknowledge that even if I just confine my own physical life to this life, the person I am began before this physical life, and the person I was will continue after this physical life. On that level, you can all agree, which gives you a kind of a stronger sense of, hey, this actually matters. This matters because even if I'm not going to be reborn in a physical way, as a sort of a selfhood in something, the effect I have, the karmic effect, meaning the intentional actions that I am producing, that's what I mean by karma. The intentional actions I'm producing will continue after I'm not here. That gives your life more responsibility than most people take. Right? I mean, now with the environmental problems and everything, there's a lot coming up in terms of, the choices we make and the carbon we, release is going to seriously impair our children's and grandchildren's lives. That's still, kind of abstract. It's abstract. But what's not abstract, is knowing that if you're a pleasant, generous, patient, happy, loving, and compassionate person, that has an immediate effect to people, and that effect will continue. Yeah? We don't need to think about carbon credits. Compassion credits. Think compassion credits and the type of compassion credits you're investing in the future. Those compassion credits, will make a big return. Let's put it that way. Okay? It'll offset a lot of damage, anger, and hatred in the world if you put more compassion credits into the atmosphere. So just on that level, you will continue. And when I say you, again, we have to get rid of this fixation we have that reincarnation is me in another body. That is a fantasy and a kind of nursery rhyme idea of reincarnation. Because the word reincarnation, as opposed to rebirth, reincarnation is a physical thing. Incarnate, like to again, inside, carnate, from carne, from like, is anyone here a carnivore? Meaning meat, right? So it's to be re-meated again, like to be put back into meat, into flesh. It means like to be in the flesh again, right? That's what reincarnation means. So like if you ever hear like the devil incarnate, means the devil in the flesh, right? He's the devil incarnate, whoever you want to choose your favorite villain, right? In the flesh. Reincarnation means me in the flesh again. Whereas rebirth is something a little more subtle, okay? It's not as physical. It can include the karmic waves that you're producing moment by moment. Okay? And then, as this life, this physical form, dissipates or loses its current state, which we call death, it's not, as I was just trying to suggest, it's not the end of your karma. Your karma then continues. And how does it continue? How does it continue? Well, that's not something we need to worry about then. That's something we need to think about now. The karma I produce now is the karma that will continue later. And if I keep producing it, then there'll be stronger and stronger waves of either compassion or anger continuing later. The more you reinforce a karmic pattern, the stronger it gets. And the harder it is to change. So if I'm angry for 50 years, it'll be a lot harder to change that a week before my physical death. Yeah. And you see that with very old people who are really like, wow, this, what can we do with this? Or if you create a lot of gentleness and compassion, it will serve you well. And the wave will become unstoppable. And then of course it's going to continue after your physical death. Because you've been making such a strong wave. Again, you don't need to think of it physically, because you can just think in terms of the effect that you've been making all along. The reason rebirth and reincarnation is generally avoided in Western Buddhism is for two reasons. One, if you go to retreat centers in North America and Europe, rebirth is generally not approached as a topic. Not many talks. Even if you go online talks, you look for rebirth, you won't find a lot. Tons of Buddhist teachings, but reincarnation, rebirth, it's sort of this one, which is a pretty central teaching in the Dharma, right from the Buddha's enlightenment. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he had 3 watches of the night. And on each watch, it was the first watch that he said, he looked back and he saw all of his past lives. So in his first, when we have the enlightenment story of the Buddha, if you go to the sutras where he's actually describing his enlightenment experience under the Bodhi tree, the first part of the night was traveling back through all the lifetimes and all the bodhisattvas and different criminals and everything that he was in the past. Right? And he observed them all through countless ages. And in the second watch, he observed it through everyone else. He was able to see the karma of everybody, the past karma of everyone, whole the world, and how everybody had lived all these lifetimes. That was in the enlightenment experience of the Buddha, was the clear view of all past lives. Right? In order to see this whole karmic reality. It wasn't to say like, I was a thief and then I was a bodhisattva and I was this and that and this and that. But to see the relationship, that karmic relationship which is unbroken throughout time. You don't need to go to the physical incarnate part of it. But the rebirth part is that karma does continue through the ages, through you. You are sort of a vessel for karma during your lifetime. During your lifetime, you're a vessel for karma. Is it good karma, meaning beneficial, or is it harmful karma? And as it passes through you, this life force, you can make a difference as to which direction that karma goes. That's the rebirth you are responsible for. Now, people talk a lot about the Buddha sitting under the tree. But going over specifically what he said about past lives, so let's talk about, him touching the earth and saying the earth is my witness. And it's a beautiful story, but the past lives is a real central teaching to understanding that we have a universal responsibility. That not only when we talk about universal responsibility, we usually mean all the people and animals and things existing now, right, on planet Earth. But if we really want to talk about universal responsibility and altruism and compassion, which is unconditional. Unconditional means past, present, and future. Unconditional love doesn't mean just for all the beings now. It's for all the beings who will be. So if you can think ahead in your mind, there's stories about the native North Americans that when they wanted to make a decision, an important decision, they would get together. I don't know if this is legend or not, but I've read this a few times. They get together and they would plan thinking 7 generations ahead. 7 generations. What's that? 150 years? Okay. So if we're going to move the village over here, or if we're going to start using the water from this river, or if we're going to start, using these animals and take this amount of buffalo, in 150 years, what's the result going to be? That's understanding your personal karma as extending beyond your physical life. Right? You don't need to think about what am I going to be reborn. You can know for sure that your actions are going to have an effect after you're no longer here. And that's where rebirth is really important to consider. So, the 2 reasons that it's not really talked about a lot in the West, since I meant to get there, is that we don't really have anything in Western traditions that most of us came from that has a parallel. I know in Judaism there's a bit of this sort of Gilgulim, but who really learns about that? And, these past lives. I mean, it's really, Kabbalah kind of, esoteric. It's esoteric. It's not mainstream. Christianity is not really there. Islam, I don't know, but I don't think so. So, in Western philosophy, it's not talked about. So, the Western traditions, rebirth and reincarnation is just a foreign concept. It's just not there. Right? It's not there. Largely, it's not there. And if it is, it's more as a metaphor, not as a real thing. Plato does touch it, but as a metaphor. Okay? And that's one thing. It's a foreign concept. The other thing is, people who are feeling like they want to move away from Western tradition, in a lot of Western tradition it says sort of, you got to believe and you have to take a leap of faith. Less in Judaism, but more in Christianity, where you gotta just believe. It's a faith-based religion. Rebirth does not have physical proof to it, So necessarily you have to start considering it from a place of faith, from a place of, I don't know, but like maybe I'll take a leap of logic and consider it possible. Right? When you're already saying, no, that's, I'm leaving Western mysticism in order to find like a rational path, which Buddhism seems like a real rational path. The suffering, how suffering is, charted in your life, and how we can do specific, methods to end that suffering. It's a medical model. But wait, how's this medical model and then we have rebirth? Which seems like, whoa. So it's not part of Western culture. It seems to parallel some of the faith that a lot of people are wanting to leave behind them. And another reason, I said two reasons, but there's a third one. A lot of Buddhist scholars consider the rebirth a cultural fragment from another time. It was like, the Buddhist time, and there's a lot of baggage from the Buddhist time. Just like the same way women weren't treated equally, so too there's rebirth. Right? So like they're both kind of ancient things that we've moved beyond. Well, the problem with that, the first two reasons, okay, that's our Western baggage. But the third one is not just that it was a old idea. Because in fact, at the Buddhist time, rebirth was not accepted universally. Right? The Buddha taught specifically about avoiding the extremes of these two schools that were really prominent back then, which was, they were called the eternalists and the nihilists. The eternalists were saying there's a soul that continues even when the body isn't there, and the nihilists were saying when you're dead, that's it, you're done. And he said both of those are like too extreme. You've got to find the middle way. Not that there's this soul that continues from body to body, that's reincarnation in a literal way, that your soul goes and transmigrates to another body. He's saying that's one extreme. Because he couldn't say what continues. What continues? Because if I say what continues, I'm going to make it into something like a soul. Okay? But to say nothing continues is to deny the truth, the natural law, moral law of karma. To say nothing continues is to say there's no karma. And that is to take us outside of the moral universe. The moral universe is that there's karma. Right? So either saying that there's death and that's it, that's the end, that's like denies karma. To say that there's something eternal that continues is to make it really like a total faith-based approach. So the middle way then appeals, they had to find certain metaphors. So it becomes like metaphorical. One of the common, I'll go through a few of them, and that's it because I'm almost out of time. As I said, we're touching on a real deep and important topic in the Buddha Dharma, that we're just touching the surface here. But it really is deeply connected to understanding karma, right? And it's really hard to understand karma in a deep way that will motivate you unless you do understand karma as existing through past, present, and future. Past before your life and future after your life. That's how we have to understand karma. Karma is not just my life. Karma is before and after. And that gives me a greater moral responsibility than I thought I had. And that's why it's really important. So there's a metaphor of an acorn. The acorn dies and becomes a tree. Where's the acorn? Where's the tree?
Are you acorn?
Acorn?
Acorn.
Acorn. Not a pine tree. From an oak tree.
Yeah.
From the oak tree, yeah. Yeah.
Acorn.
Yeah, the acorn from the...
Popcorn.
Yeah, not popcorn. Although that probably works too. The popcorn becomes... Yeah. Gotta take the karma back to China, factory, all this stuff. What's gonna happen? Yeah. different teachers use different things. The Dalai Lama talks about the weather. You can't say that it's raining today and it just started today. I mean, when did the rain start? Like, when did the rain today begin? At 3 o'clock? No. I mean, yesterday? No. When did today's rain begin? Right? And where does today's rain go? In the gutter? In the earth? In the tree? Where did it go? So you see, if we talk about the weather, it's also an interesting way of understanding, the continuation of karma through rebirth. One form changing into another form while still remaining some connection to what it was. It changes and maintains connection, and yet is continuing on to the future, right? It doesn't end, it doesn't stay the same, and it continues. The river is another one, okay? So we get into the, when we try to understand the middle way of this between extremes of saying there's something eternal and there's nothing, right, that continues, we have to just think in metaphors. If we try to think literally, we're thinking soul. If we don't think, about it, then it just ends and my life is done. So it's useful then to try to find the metaphor that speaks to you to understand this, like a candle, lighting another candle. Okay, what continues? What stays, behind? What is shared? How does it transmigrate? From transmigration, like birds migrating, trans across. So transmigration doesn't mean like necessarily the same form. It means there's this constant flow of form and changing, which for our purpose is the flow of intention. Right? And that makes it an important moral consideration. What am I giving to the future, which starts in a second and continues 100 million billion years from now? What am I offering to that? And that's where your karma and your understanding of rebirth can inform your choices. So there are moments where we have a sort of awakening. And that awakening brings us into the present. But we understand that awakening happened because of all the practice I was doing in the past. And that awakening will have, an effect on how I live in the future. So that present moment, which is so precious, is never just the present moment. I'll share with you, yesterday I was riding my bike to the group we have on Sunday evenings by the Prime Minister's residence at Zangville. And I'm on King George Street. It's the main street there. Big bus route. And it was raining, and it just rained, and the streets were wet. Not a good time to ride your bike. Okay? But some lessons I need to learn again and again. So there's a bus right behind me, like honks his horn to get me out of the way. And I look behind him, and he says, points me to move over. So I go to turn, and lo and behold, my bike flips, and I'm sprawled on the ground. There's a bus right at me. Another bus, it's 4 lanes. Another bus stops, and 2 other cars stop. The whole street is stopped, and I'm lying on at nighttime in the dark on the ground. And there's nothing here. What do I do now? What do I do now? Well, I get up. I get up, and I just thought, wow, it was quite a phenomenon. I'm shaking from shock and crying. I'm like, oh my God. And I pull it aside, and I start walking, limping over to the, luckily it was only 2 blocks away from the meditation. So I limp dragging my bike over to the meditation. And I sat and we had the evening. But when you have a moment where you realized that you could have died, and it wasn't really theoretical, really wasn't. There was a moment where, I could die. There's a bus at like a meter, like behind me, stopped. Could have died there, and it was painful. But what these moments offer you, as well as your meditation, is clarity. The clarity is you have a choice. What are you going to do now? That's the question. What are you going to do now? With this experience, and the past has evaporated. You are no longer a product of your past in that moment. To be free of karma, of the negative karma, means you can choose in the very next moment what you want to be and what you want to do. That you're no longer defined. Karma is not a given. Sometimes it takes an accident to realize that freedom, that the past has broken off. And then we quickly tie it back again. But my only point of the story is to tell you, I hope it doesn't have to come to you getting like a risk of death to realize that you can choose the life you want to live now. It's not chosen for you. Your karma is your karma. The past is your belief. And if you believe in it, right, then it'll take you where the past wants to go. So I'm really exhorting you and asking you to choose your moment carefully. Otherwise, it'll be chosen for you. So again, I'm sorry for going over time. If anyone wants to ask a question, I'll stay around and we can discuss after. But if you're in a rush to go, then you should feel like you can go. But let's just come back for 1 minute to the stillness of this moment. And as we breathe in and we breathe out, everything just is released. And you can accept the full responsibility of choosing this moment. You are here by choice. You are breathing by choice. You are placing your attention where you want by choice.